Thank you very much for the ability to be here today. So, Dadi is not here, but nevertheless, he invited me to present a bit about our book. He talked about it earlier, but nevertheless, it's some of what I will present today. Of course, this is an invitation to buy it, but let's have a look about what the content is, what I'm talking about today. So first of all, I'm going to take a step back and just look at what is talent, because that's important for how we think about talent development. And why we need to do that is part of that philosophy that's in this book. And I'll present some of the core ideas from the book. And at the end, we have some room for some questions. Let's have a look at that. So when you see these persons in this slide, we often think about some traits or something like that when we see these persons. If we see, for instance, Mozart here, we will often think that he's a genius in his area, that it's something in it. It's something that he's born with. He's just a natural talent or gifted in some way. We could think the same about some of the other guys and girls in this picture. But often, we need to consider a bit more than it's just something that we're born with. It's also the research trends when we look at talent development. It could be something in it, something we're born with, and that's often the case. We think that about the gifted persons. It could be the amount of hours, the specialization process, or the paradoxes in that, or it could be something about the environment. And we need to consider all three parts of this. So, for instance, Mozart, yes, he had a perfect ear for music. But at the same time, he started when he was 3 years old to compose music because his dad was a great teacher. So, also a lot of hours, and composed, I think, Don Giovanni when he was 13 or something like that. So, a lot of different aspects we need to consider, not just being really or having a lot of potential at an early age, but also a lot of hours and the environment. And what I mean by that is that how we perceive talent is crucial for how we work with talent development. So we need to be aware of our logic. So when I work with coaches, this is often one of the questions that I pose to them when I start working with them. Because if we think that talent is something that is in it, then we'll look for the talents or the persons that are great right now. If we think it's something about the amount of hours, then it's just a matter of starting really early and then training a lot of hours. If we think it's something about the environment, then it's something about the context and the relationships and how we do it between each other. So how we really think about this is really important for how we do. So you can check on yourself as well. So what is your understanding of talent? It's rooted in these research trends. It's something of the biological perspective with the innate potential. It's something about the amount and quality of training. We could see that as part of the day-to-day about specialization, and we can look more into it regarding the environment as well. And this is more an individual focus, and the ecological perspective is something that we've been looking into for a long time. Okay, so taking that idea forward, we need to consider the weight that the specialization and the professionalization does to working with young athletes. And my agenda for today is looking more into how can we create some alternative perspectives on creating a balance. So we heard a lot from the brilliant presentations earlier that what goes along with specialization and professionalization is, or could be, identity issues, mental health issues, dropout, and such. And in order to prevent that or create the balance, and what is the agenda of the book as well, is we need to focus on developing the person behind the athlete. We need to look at long-term development. And what we're highly influenced of in this book as well is the holistic ecological approach that Dadi mentioned a bit earlier. All right. So what I'll do now is provide a bit of description of the factors that could create this balance and what we think is needed to outweigh the heavy toll that specialization and professionalization does to athlete development. Okay, let's look at the first one. So what we think is really important is that we look at people before podiums. In order to do that, we need to promote a holistic skills package. So promoting a holistic skills package is needed to create that balance and equipping players or athletes with the skills needed to cope with the transitions that they meet in life and in sport. So early on when I did my PhD, I researched into what is needed in order to be a good youth player at a youth academy in Denmark called AGF. And I found that these areas or these skills were really needed to be a good player at youth level. So for instance, the self-awareness part, the goal setting part, being motivated to training a lot of hours, planning and organizational skills, ability to work hard, but also the ability to handle adversity, stress, and pressure. Also, what I saw was that there was a difference between what they said in that academy and what they actually did. They talked a lot about this stuff, but when I talked to the professional players at professional level, what they really needed was the ability to set your own goals because you're on your own, the ability to handle adversity, stress, and pressure. But it was not something that they taught the youth players. They just talked about it. So if we need to focus on something like life skills, psychosocial skills, it's skills like all other skills. We need to practice it to be good at it. So if we take that idea forward and look at this in regard of transitions, the sporting career, and especially the normative transitions, the fixed transitions, what we know about, for instance, at athletic level. So we need to equip the players early on in the development phase for them to make the transition, for instance, into professional phase later on. We also need those skills that, like self-awareness, planning skills, organizational skills, to combine academic level with the athletic level. So in Denmark at least, and of course the Scandinavian countries mostly also, we are really organized regarding combining athletic level and vocational level, and therefore combining school and sport, which is quite important for at least Denmark. So we need to equip them with the skills, not just when they need to make the transition that are fixed, but early on. So teaching for them to understand what is needed, or who am I, and what do I need to do in order to cope with all the demands that they experience during those transitions. Also, if we look at the non-normative transitions, the ones that we're not able to plan for, but happens out of the blue sometimes. When I ask some of the players, they often experience development like this across time. This is just goes along. I will do great, I will be the best, I'll fulfill my dreams. This is what the coaches may think. It will happen in phases, in steps, but it might be that this is more like life. A bit bumpy, some setbacks, some difficulties, a lot of issues along the way. And especially regarding the setbacks, we need a holistic skill package. We need to equip them with the skills in order to cope with these issues that they experience. A lot of in the literature mentions now that we need those setbacks in order to develop. When I talked to some football players as well regarding, also in my PhD, they talked about those bumps on the road as some of the most important ones. They learned especially something about themselves, not about playing football or anything like that, but how to handle difficulties, how to handle problems, how to handle setbacks. Something that were helpful and really needed in order to make the transition to professional level. If they didn't have that experience, even though it was really, really difficult at that time. There was a ACL injury that one of the players talked about, and that is difficult. A long time, 1 year, maybe your dreams are crushed, but nevertheless, when they saw themselves at that time, it was difficult, of course, but something that was the best for them regarding their psychosocial development. And sometimes also what is needed in order to still continue development, or if you drop out, that is something that is needed, also the holistic skills package, in order to make the transition out of sport or to recreational sports. So it is important, the holistic skills package, in order to create the balance from early specialization and professionalization as well. All right, that's one step. Another one is that young athletes are not miniature grown-ups. We heard a lot about this already. But also, why is it that we need to consider this? So young people, young persons have specific needs. When we look at the literature also, but also at the practical applied experiences, it is often the young sports psychologists and some of the coaches that work with the young people. And they have a need of guidelines, the one to start working with young people. Young people are not always mature enough for the same methods as adult elite athletes, even though then they have a mindset, and often the coaches that I work with have an idea that they need the same skills. The young people need the same skills as adult elite athletes. But this is not the case. They're not miniature adults. So therefore, bear in mind, be mindful about the cognitive and emotional differences across age groups, because this informs how we do it. Just looking, let's say, at the cognitive development in the mid-childhood, 6 to 11 years, even though it's still a broad category, they're concrete thinkers, logical, generally don't reason that abstractly or consider possibilities, and just posing a question about psychology to a boy or girl, and Katie talked about it as well, it's not something they would understand. They're not able to understand at all. All right, then when the brain is developed a bit more, let's say in the mid-adolescence, then they will start to be able to think a bit more abstractly. So considering that is really important. And a lot of coaches do not consider that, or sports psychologists for that sake as well, because the communication is adapted to the adult elite level. But we need to change that idea, and that would start with really being mindful about, all right, who is this that I'm talking to? Which brain is it that I'm talking to, and what would they understand at this level? So being really mindful about their cognitive and emotional level is important to develop the young athletes. If we, there was some talk about identity as well, and I like this. It's a study from a British study, some years back. But what it shows is for young girls at the age of 13, shows and the bubbles kind of characterizes what is important at this age group, at this level. For instance, it's pretty equal with school, hobbies, interest, family, sport, and friends. It's equally important at this age. But the transition and development, for instance, in the age of 16, we see a big difference in what is important for girls at this age. So for instance, school, college, friends, relationships, shopping, and today would be social media, is way beyond the importance of sport. So the importance for young people changes across time, and therefore we need to be mindful about that as well, because at least in Denmark, also a small country, we have to be aware of the dropout rates. So if we push for sport to be the most important part and just go for all-in professionalization, then we'll lose a lot of athletes in that process. But creating space for the young athletes to get a bit more sense of who am I, what is it that I want to pursue, and what is meaningful for me, is quite important to keep them in just being physical, and then afterwards they can make their choice whether sport is really important for them. In that sense, also really needed as many as possible for as long as time possible. So, all right, so we need to be mindful about that things changes across time and that affects identity or what is important for us. Another part is that personal growth is nurtured in good sporting environments. So this is something that we have been nerdy about for a really long time, looking into successful talent development environments or good development environments. And what we have seen across time now when we look at all the research is some certain features that you could consider as well regarding how is it that we could create some good opportunities for young people and what we need to do in order to create good environments. So for instance, some of the features that are important and goes across the different studies is, for instance, that training groups that have supportive relationships, that we create opportunities for inclusion in training communities, supportive relationships and friendships within the group, despite performance driven, so meaning good communication all in all. That we promote or emphasize good role models. That means that community of practice that includes prospective and current elite athletes and opportunities to train with elite athletes and elite athletes who are willing to pass on their knowledge. So it's not a competition, but it's actually something that will help create a really nice environment if we are not keeping all the information that we need for ourselves, but we pass it on. Support of sporting goals by the wider environment, opportunities to focus on sports, school, family, friends, we heard a lot about that as well, and others' knowledge and accept the athlete's dedication to sport. The support that I talked about, the holistic skills package, opportunities to develop skills and competencies that benefit outside of the sporting domain, such as autonomy, commitment, and considering athletes as whole persons. And some of the other parts is also training that allows for diversification, and that means sampling different sports that you just heard previously from handball. A lot of different sports because that provides a broad motoric foundation, focusing on long-term development instead of early success, and age-appropriate amount and content of training. And some of the things that I've been nerding a lot about also in football is that we need a strong and coherent organizational culture that is characterized by coherence between artifacts, what we see, what we say, the values, and what we actually do, all the basic assumptions. Culture is what provides stability to a group and supports a learning environment. And at the end, coordination and communication between sport, school, family, and other components, and athletes that experience concordance and synergy in daily life. And some of the studies that we've seen is that this is the right one is an example of an environment that was not that successful. They had individualized training programs, intergroup rivalry, elite athletes that kept their secrets, non-sporting environment showing a lack of understanding, solely focus on sport and winning at all costs, promoting early specialization, focus solely on developing sport-specific skills, focus on short-term success, fragmented culture, in which the coach promoted, you need to focus on nutrition, and then he showed up eating pizza all the time. A lack of communication, conflicting interests, and so on. So this is something that goes beyond or across a lot of different studies and a lot of different environments and sports, and something that we're able to see also in youth sport environments now, and we're looking into high-performance environments as well, so we'll have some more insight into that. All right, so that ties pretty much into the holistic ecological approach that we need to look at the relationships, communication, and the context as a whole, and something that should balance out early specialization and the professionalization part. All right. Another big part, and something that is important today, is that mental health, that thriving is a result of sustainable cultures as well. And that ties pretty much into that we need to be mindful. That's a bit about the philosophy as well, or how is it that we perceive talent also? That we need to broaden our understanding maybe on mental health. So we tried some years back, Andreas Kyttel and I, to define what is mental health. It's not the absence of mental illness. It's a dynamic state of well-being in which athletes can realize their potential, see a purpose and meaning in sport and life, experiencing trusting personal relationships, cope with common life stresses and the specific stresses in elite sport, and are able to act autonomously according to the values. So this is something we heard already, what is important to balance out the specialization part, and something we need to consider that when we talk about purpose and meaning, relationships, coping with stressors, but also about autonomy, this is something that we can develop. If it's as decision makers, coaches, sports psychologists, it's something that we can work with. And it's something that we should be aware of and focus on, and this is a model from Team Denmark, and it's a bit difficult to read, but nevertheless shows that we need to be aware of what it is in leadership and in the environment that we need to focus on, because if we don't, we will often have the case of psychological unsafe environments. And if it's leadership and how we communicate, and we talked about that a bit earlier, this is something we also need to consider. So this is the idea of tying mental health with environment and leadership, and something that you can look into also if you are interested in that. So mental health is important, and it's even more important today. When we started looking at it in 2018 in Denmark, not a big issue, but it's a big issue. And when we look at all the surveys on mental health and well-being in Denmark, it's getting worse and worse and worse. It's a big issue, and something that we need to take care of. And it's not solely isolated for non-sporting people. It's something that we all experience, and there's a lot of big stressors, or some big stresses that we need to consider, especially about the private domain, the sporting domain, and how they interact, and how they influence mental health and well-being. Okay, so let's have a look at the next one. So we call that might. With great power comes great responsibility. And this is something that we looked into. It's a bit more on the applied side. So we've been working a lot with mindfulness and acceptance and commitment therapy. And that's something that we use a lot regarding working with the players and coaches also. And I'll just show a bit about that. So this is our understanding on mental toughness. And it's always thought that mental toughness is about being a Navy SEAL that are able to do everything at all times. But our understanding on mental toughness is this. So doubt and worry is a natural and inevitable part of elite sport. Therefore, we define mental strength or mental toughness as the ability to act in accordance with motives and values, even when faced with difficult thoughts and feelings. So therefore, value clarification of athletes and coaches is an important part of our work. So it's not just about being tough and coping with everything that are thrown in your face. This is about knowing yourself, knowing who you are and what is important to you. Not what everybody else thinks is important for you, but what you really think is important for yourself. So it's in-depth work, and something that is, for me, the most important part when I work with athletes. I always start with this part of trying to clarify what is values, why are they important. And in acceptance commitment theory, there's a lot of metaphors, and this is one of them. So values are something you do, or qualities of something to do. Values can be acted out. It's not an end goal. It's not something we achieve. They define a direction and a certain way you want to be and how to act during the career or in life. In difficult days, it may be that you have thoughts and feelings that make you want to give in to frustration, or escape from a challenging situation. In these situations, it is important to be aware of your values. And the picture here shows that it's the idea or the metaphor of a lighthouse, something that directs you in a certain way. So even when it's difficult along the way, you're able to focus on your values. They should show you the direction. It's not something that I will achieve. So if I have a value of hard work and competence or self-reflection, it's not something that I will achieve at one point, but it's something that guides me regarding what I want to do in my life. So I need to have some components in my life. I need to, for instance, work hard. I need to also be able to go in depth with stuff that are important to me, because that elevates my idea of competence, and at least think a bit about who I am, which is the self-awareness or self-regulation part. So it's something that guides us, something that is important. And this is rooted in what is the balance also for us individually. And this is the model, also based on mindfulness and acceptance commitment therapy. It's about psychological flexibility. And it's the three components that are important to be mindful about. It's the ability to be present, to stay in the moment also, but also the ability to open up to your experiences and not get sabotaged by thoughts and feelings, but stay committed to what it is that matters, your values, and do what matters. So taking steps in order to focus on what is important in your life. Okay, so we need this balance. So these 5 areas is something that we try to promote. It's something that you are able to read about in the book if you want to. There's a lot more, but something that is important to create the balance, because there's a lot of weight on the specialization part. And if we need to think about long-term development and not having dropout early on, then we need some of this stuff as well. We need those whole person approaches and looking a bit more into the environment as well. So talent development is for as many people as possible, for as long as possible, of the highest possible quality, and with the highest possible degree of meaningfulness. And this is what we mean by sustainable talent development. So by that, thank you for listening.
Of course, we have more questions, and if you have any more, please send it in. Are we underutilizing teaching transferable skills? Can success in one area like football lead to success in another, like school? How can we do better there?
If we're underutilizing it?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. We're not doing what we need to do. At least from my experience, it's still the case in Danish sport that we're not being good enough at integrating it as part of development, just a natural part of development. So therefore, we'll not equip them with the skills to make the transitions later on. So we really need to be even more, and of course that demands resources. And when we think about resources or adding resources, it's not about making it even more professional. It's just about teaching teaching the athletes about who am I, also beyond the athlete. So it's really important to not make it professionalization too early, because that's sometimes the idea when we think about adding more stuff into it. We try to be even better. We heard a lot about that. So not really being too professional in your idea of adding resources, but as something that balances out what is also, or will always be there, the professionalization part. We're not able to escape it, so therefore we need to balance it out, and we can do it by focusing on that part.
And you said too early. What is too early? When is the sweet spot?
For me, the early part, I would like to if it was me, it was just for as long as possible, as many as possible, as I mentioned, but focusing on the environment, a nice development environment for as long time as possible. And there are some examples in Denmark in football that they're able to do it, let them stay in their own grassroots environment for a long time, and then at the age of 15 they go to an academy, for instance. So being in there close to friends, being able to meet up with friends outside of sport, close to school, but still being able to do stuff besides that, unorganized sports and different sports, is just so important. So therefore, not too early means that for as long as possible, as many as possible would be the sweet spot for me. And it's not, I don't have a specific age. No. It's pretty context dependent.
Recently, a report was made about elite sports in Iceland. One of the recommendations was to create elite sports tracks in elementary school. What do you think about that?
It's pretty similar to what is happening in Denmark. There's elite sports schools in municipalities in Denmark, so they have that. But it's just a way of schools working together with clubs in which, for instance, in the morning, 2 days a week, they're able to practice in the clubs, but it's part of the schedule in the school, so they'll practice from 8 to 10, and then afterwards they go to school. So far that works pretty good, because it's founded on the philosophies or ideas about talent development from Team Denmark. They're also mindful about this part because they integrated that several years ago, this sustainable talent development idea. So not if we put in, or because we're not able to do anything about it, but they put in more practice, you also need something to balance that out. Because you will just put more pressure, like we heard today, put more pressure on children, the athletes, so therefore we need something to balance that out. You can just not put more and more into it, because that will just create stressors and problems with mental health across time. So therefore, keeping the balance is the important part here as well. Okay.
In your work with elite athletes, what lessons have you learned that you would have wanted to know when you first started?
Nice. A lot of, I talked to Daddy and Christian about it last night. I wrote a paper called Bringing a Knife to a Gunfight, and that's about my experiences in professional football. I was pretty hammered afterwards. First time into a professional club, and I was there a year. So that's kind of the logic in football, that when the coach goes, he often brings his staff. If he goes to a club, he will bring his staff, and when he's sacked, the staff will go too. I was as well, and that was my first experiences of big business and high politics in professional sports, and I would like to have known a bit about that before I started, because then I was able to maybe compensate for the difficulties that goes along. So it's really difficult to go into big organizations, and you need to be aware of the politics. So that's what I try to teach my students now, actually, is you need to know about the politics and the logic. And what I do now is that before I start working with athletes, is that the ones that hire me, I want them to clarify that sports psychology is what we're going to do, and we're going to do it across time. That could be the performance director, sporting director. And after that, I want him to clarify that with the board of directors. Okay. Because at one point, there will be the barrier for development or the culture of sports psychology in the club. Mm-hmm. And then afterwards, I want the performance director to clarify that with the coach. It could be that the coach is on board or not on board. It could be the agenda of the performance director or not. But then we have the link: board of directors, performance coach, performance director, coach. And when that's clarified and everybody's on board, then I can start working with the athletes, but not before. And then, instead of just going into an environment, saying this is what we need to do, then I analyze the environment before I start. So spending a lot of time knowing before doing is also important. I would like to have known that.
Knowing before doing, okay. If you were a coach in a toxic environment, what steps would you take to change it?
That's a complex one. It could be that you're a young sports psychologist going into the club. Then it's just the most difficult situation because it might be your first job. And you know the coach is toxic. He's creating a toxic environment. We got some documentaries in Denmark about that. A club called Esbjerg. It's just crazy. But what you see, it's a great documentary. I use it for teaching purposes as well. So you're not able to do anything because the power is beyond you. You're not able to control anything. You're able to control what it is you do. So for you, you got to find something that is meaningful in your daily work because it's beyond you. You can say to the coach, you're creating a toxic environment. He will say, all right, see you. But that's how it is. If you don't support it, it's so trust-based in, let's say professional football, meaning that if you undermine his authority or not follow his ideas, you'll probably get sacked within a week or something like that. Or you'll put you in an office somewhere. You'll not be able to do anything. So, yeah, it's really difficult. And for me, it's something about finding out what it is you want to do there. You can get some great experiences, but it's not where you're supposed to be in the long term. So get some experiences on what is difficult, but also what are you able to do in difficult times.
Okay. How can parents help their kids to build mental strength?
By not being too over-demanding and pushy as a parent, but talking more about them as their kids and talking to them about them as kids, not as professional athletes. So it's about what we talk to them about. So if we always, when they sit in the cars, we talk about, how did you do today? How many points did you score, or whatever it is. Then we emphasize the idea of the kid as professionals all the time. So we need to be mindful about what it is we talk to them about. So their kids, so what would we talk to our kids about if it's not about sport? It will be something totally different. So what is important right now in their age group, at that stage, at their cognitive level? So we need to be aware of that and talk to them about that as well. When they're in their teens, it's a lot of different stuff going on, and let's talk about that instead of the sport, because then we don't emphasize too much about that sporting area, and we just heard tons of evidence about it, that it's so over-focused on demanding so far, so let's talk about something else to create that balance.
Okay, so what about if I'm on my way with my kid in the car after a game and we lost, and I'm like, I love that tree.
Yeah.
It's a nice, like...
We could do, of course, it's, I don't know if that goes in English, but the elephant in the room or something like that. There's something that we could address.
Yeah.
But also, what I try to focus on, even across different age groups, that goes for professional and youth as well, that there's a time limit for focusing on what happened in the past.
Okay.
We're not able to change anything about it. But if we spend all our time thinking about what happened in the past, it's really difficult to stay present in the moment. We don't have our mind invested in anything that goes on right now. We're just in the past and we're not able to change it. Mm-hmm. So there's a time limit for it, saying, all right, this is the time limit. You need to analyze, put it in the grave, make your peace with it, and then that's it. Then you need to stay present. And that's a mindfulness skills. You can teach that to a lot of persons despite the age group. So, of course, trying to do that, that's one of my ideas.
Okay, what path would you choose for your own children?
I didn't understand the last presentation, but it looked like my children. A lot of different sports.
Yeah.
All kinds of sport. They've been doing gymnastics, handball, horseback riding, and now it's swimming. Now it's football. And they just love it. It's a great community. It's a great... they have some great friends there, so the social part is just elevated, and it's the best for them. So that's what I encourage. I don't have any ambitions on their part. They should just enjoy doing sports, and the happiness that goes along is the most important part. So that's what is important for me.
Cool. We have 2 more questions here. How would an intervention with mindfulness and acceptance commitment therapy look in professional environment? That was rough.
Yeah. That's a big, long question.
Yeah.
It's pretty complex, but nevertheless, that's what I try to do. But yeah, it ties a bit into what I talked about earlier. So I need the commitment from the management before I start doing anything. They need to be on board. And when they're on board, then it's a method. It could be a lot of different other methods of how we do it. It could be different. It's based on cognitive behavioral therapy. It's just a bit different than the traditional part, but nevertheless, that's what I would do, or what I would focus on. For instance, with professional footballers, it would be tied into knowing something about themselves and their own reaction patterns, especially when they're under pressure. So that's just the level that I'm working at right now. That would be national teams, and that would be what I emphasize in one of the areas that I have in my curriculum for the national teams. It's performance under pressure, but it's not just performance. It's actually ties into the idea I talked about, mental toughness or mental strength. It's knowing yourself and your own values and how you react in certain ways, and being able to work with that in a lot of different situations during a game, and in high pressure and high stress situations. So that was not very specific, but it's something that I try to do. Yeah.
Okay, here we have, are we underutilizing teaching transferable skills? Can success in one area, like football, lead to success in another, like school? How can we do better there?
That was the first question.
That was, I thought so, I'm almost marking. Okay, so I have a last question,
Yeah.
because you traveled with the Danish team to the European Championship.
Yeah.
Was there anything there that surprised you, or like, what did you learn about their communication skills and stuff in the group?
Not surprising. No, it's actually when you try and go into a big event, it has to be really dull and boring and no drama, because they need to, for most of the time, actually just be recharging their batteries, their energy, and relaxing. And when it's time for practice or games, then they need to be able to focus really fast in shifting situations and cope with difficult stuff or adversities. So there was not that much surprising, because we were well prepared, and it sounds really dull or not that funny, but that's how it's supposed to be. It's how we have to prepare, so we don't get surprised when we're there. And we did a good preparation, and that doesn't mean that we'll perform great, because we met some great opponents, and that's how it is. That's something different than the psychological piece of it.
All right, let's give him a round of applause.